Hi, this is Yossi Klein Halevi speaking to you from quarantine in my apartment in French Hill in Jerusalem, and delighted to be participating in the Aliyah festival, and delighted to be speaking to all of you who are considering joining what to me is the greatest Jewish adventure, certainly of our time, but I would even go so far as to say perhaps of any time. I made Aliyah in the summer of 1982, which is a very particular moment in the history of Israel. It was the beginning of the First Lebanon War, the moment when we lost our national cohesion, our ability to come together during war. War had always united Israelis, and now for the first time, it was war that was dividing us. So it was a deeply demoralizing time. Inflation was approaching South American limits. It was 300-400%. And there was really a feeling of the country beginning to unravel. And so it was a very strange moment to be making Aliyah. And yet, in retrospect, it was a very good moment to come here. Because what I was really telling myself is that I am committing to Israel regardless of how the story turns out. I am joining the Israeli roller coaster, and if you happen to join at a low moment, then you'll know that the roller coaster goes up. And there really was something in some way reassuring about coming here and knowing that I'm here for good, for keeps. And I'm throwing my lot in with the Israeli adventure. And my approach to being here was to be interested in everything. Now, interested is a neutral term. By interested, I mean how Israeli society was playing out in good ways, less good ways, the absurdities of Israeli life, the joys of Israeli life. It all fascinated me. And I had this attitude that I was in some way a kind of Jewish time traveler, that I found myself in the Jewish future, the future that Jews had always prayed for, anticipated, believed would happen. And I was privileged to be a Jewish time traveler and find myself in the future state of Israel. And having that attitude of, I won't say neutral interest because it was quite passionate, but a certain detachment from, oh, do I like Israel? Do I like this aspect of Israel? Or don't I like that aspect of Israel? It was all mine. And Israel was a projection of my being. And so I embraced it all. And I remember friends, family back in America would ask me, so do you like it over there? Are you thinking of coming home? And my answer to both those questions was really to be in some ways perplexed. Do I like it in Israel? Well, there are many things that I like about Israel. There are many things that I wish were different here. I love Israel. I feel my life to be so entwined with Israel that I can't really look at Israel objectively in that sense. And as far as would I ever think of going home, well, the obvious answer to that, of course, is all of you can fill in the blank there. This is home. And it was home from the moment that I stepped off the plane. It has been home ever since. I'm approaching almost 40 years here. And I never looked back. Maybe I'll just one or two more points about what I've learned here and what the adventure of becoming an Israeli is about. The first is to discover the difference between being a Jew in the diaspora, where you are a member of a community, and being part of a sovereign nation. To be a member of a community is to join what is effectively a self-selecting entity. Communities tend to be more homogeneous, people who generally vote like I do, whose religious observance more or less approximates my own. When you join the state of Israel, you are throwing your lot in with radical diversity. You are connecting your fate, literally your life and death fate, with people, communities, groups whose ideas may appall you, may infuriate you, and yet you are bound to this wider heterogeneous construct known as a people. And we function here as a people. Of course, we have our separate communities, but the foundation of Israeliness is the constant quest for at least a minimal commonality. And one becomes an Israeli by opening oneself up, dafka, to communities whose ideas you find objectionable and perhaps even dangerous, but who are still part of your being, your Israeliness. At one point, this was probably the early 90s, I met a woman who had recently immigrated from Moscow. And I asked her, what surprised you about Israel? And she said, she looks at me and she says, that you have stupid Jews here. And I was a little taken aback. I said, well, what do you mean? She said, well, in Moscow, all the Jews were either intellectuals or engineers. Everyone seemed to be intelligent, professional, successful. And I come to Israel and I meet intelligent Jews, but also stupid Jews. And I was really perplexed and depressed. And then I realized, here in Israel, we're a people. Here we can allow ourselves to be as smart or as stupid as each individual Jew's inclination is. In Russia, we were a minority. Each of us had to be better than the others in order to be as good as the others, to be accepted. And here in Israel, we're a people. We can be ourselves. Now I love that story because it tells us something essential about the nature of Israeli life. And so my bracha to each of you is to gird your loins, as they say, and chazak v'yamatz, and to take on the adventure of Aliyah with joy, with gratitude, with a great deal of humor, and self-deprecating humor really helps. And to be open to, most of all, being surprised, and to learn things about Jewish identity, Jewish life, the experience of Jewish peoplehood that you could never have imagined you would learn. B'hatzlacha to all of you.